Well, Bourdain's death follows a report from the CDC showing a rise in America's suicide rate. According to the report, suicide rates increased by 30% across half of the U.S. states over just the last 2 decades. The rise in suicides was also seen across all races, ages, genders, and ethnicities. Joining me now from Richmond, Virginia, Dr. David Buxton. He's a psychiatrist. Dr. Buxton, thank you so much for joining us. You know, these recent suicides, Kate Spade, Anthony Bourdain, it's bringing up this conversation on suicide. I'm curious what your take is. What stood out to you in this CDC report?
Well, I think it's just an amazing way of sharing the knowledge that as a psychiatrist I see on a daily basis, that suicide is an epidemic in our country. What I'd like to share with everyone is the fact that one person actually commits suicide every 16.2 minutes. So it's a great epidemic that we're facing that is now being highlighted, unfortunately, this week.
That is just devastating. So by the time this hour show is done, 4 people would have committed suicide in this country. It's just devastating to hear. This study also shows that 54% of the people who actually commit suicide, there was no known mental health conditions. How can so many people with mental health conditions just go undiagnosed in this country?
That's also, I think, one of the major things it highlights. One of the things I think with mental health that's different than other medical illnesses like cancer is that something that we don't talk about. Most people will share that they're struggling with cancer, but unfortunately things like depression, anxiety, people really kind of hold in themselves and don't share with friends to look for that support and also show signs to other people that they need help.
What can be done to erase that stigma behind the mental health aspect of this?
I think one of the things, without a doubt, is putting more funding behind getting the message out. There's some wonderful things online and suicide 1-800 numbers that are seen below. I think that's a major element to it. I also think as a country we need to kind of be more open and discuss our anxiety and depression and our struggles that we're having, not only as individuals, but in a greater sense.
You know what we don't talk about also, Dr. Buxton, is what it's like for the people left behind, the guilt they must feel, the shame, the stigma. How do they go on? In many ways, they never get over this. What do you say to those people? What's the best thing they can do if you're left trying to pick up the pieces?
Without a doubt, it's one of the hardest things, especially because many times when individuals have anxiety and depression, no one knows that they're struggling. So it comes as a shock. I think this week, as a culture and society, we're shocked that these 2 individuals who have seemingly a very wonderful, successful life commit suicide. I think one of the things is to check in on those individuals and say, how are you doing? We know that there is some times when someone commits suicide that other people may be struggling around them. And so just asking, are they okay? At other times, I think you should be aware of how you're internally dealing with it. And if you're struggling yourself, looking for your own mental health or guidance.
I just feel like dealing with any sort of death, it makes us all so awkward. We never know what the right thing is to say. What do you say to a colleague? What do you say to a friend? What do you say to a family member? It just sometimes you're at such a loss for words and how to deal with that. The other thing, doctor, that really stood out to me about this report was an increase in suicide rates for women. Why is that?
It's very interesting. One of the other parts, I think, is that not only did the report show that part, which I want to get to, but the other fact is that for every 1 person that completes suicide, there's 25 people that attempt it. So the numbers are much larger than we've seen in the past. With women especially, that rate's been going up. I think that there's multiple variables that are applying to that. One, I think, is the fact that women are going through different difficulties in our generation of the past 20 years that they've not gone before. I think divorce rates are up. The other issue, I spoke to a friend this morning, postpartum. I believe there's also the fact that just the opiate epidemic that we know we're facing is gender neutral, that anyone's affected by that. And the other element to this is that we know that suicide actually goes up during a recession or when the housing market popped. And so part of this is we're seeing a downstream effect that I think especially is affecting women.
Is there a time of year where their suicides increase? Is there a moment or a period in a person's lifetime when you really have to watch out for it?
I think there's a certain anniversaries we talk about. I know in my own psychiatric practice is sometimes holidays are hard for individuals, or birthdays or anniversaries, times where there's memories from the past that might be both positive but also very negative. So I think there's that element. I think we also know that there's a disorder called season affective disorder, that during winter and changes of seasons, people have a tendency to get more depressed. So I think there are a little bit of elements in both seasonal and also people's own life trajectory.
Dr. David Buxton, it's such an important conversation we're starting to have in such a horrible moment this week for these families and so many others who have lost loved ones. I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And I want to remind you, if you know of someone who's struggling with mental illness or even suicidal thoughts, depression, there is a suicide prevention lifeline number, 1-800-273-8255. There's someone available to take your call 24 hours a day.